Welcome, everybody. This is Bret, and today is Monday, February 12th, 2018, and we are here for another reading of Codeword Barbelon 666, Danger in the Vatican, and I'm joined here with Jörg in Belgium. How you doing, Jörg?
Oh, I'm fine. I'm just surprised how awake you sound all of a sudden. I texted
geez.
you out of bed a few minutes ago, and now all of a sudden you're there. You sound good, Brad. How are you doing?
Just fine.
Okay, great.
Little cold water does a miracle.
Yeah, especially when you push it up in your face like I advised you to do. Yeah. Listen, without any further ado, I'd say that we start off directly and try to get through chapter 11 maybe in one reading. I don't know if that is any even possible, but it's not that big a
Cool.
that big a chapter. It only has about 4 pages from 115 including 119. And it deals with spiritual exercises, the light from a cave. In the book Codeword Barbelon 666, Danger in the Vatican, the Sons of Loyola and their plans for world domination. I mean, when we speak about the spiritual exercises, Brett, one video of an hour never would be enough. You could fill hours and hours, even days about this.
Yes.
This is such a deep subject that I guess that even P.D. Stuart will only scratch the surface in this. But the most important part is that the people who watch this video and listen to this video understand that these spiritual exercises are a kind of opening up to demons and getting possessed. And by that, doing the bidding of your master, which, as we learned already in the Oath of the Jesuits, is that they do everything without thinking, without any mental reservation, without a mind or a conscience or a conscience of their own. They do everything the superior of the society tells them. And to become a quote-unquote zombie like that, you have to take another spirit over your own spirit. Yeah? You really have to work it all out. And this is actually what spiritual exercises are all about. Listen, it starts here with a quote, spiritual exercises, the light from a cave, according to the practice of priests of great zeal. This is what Antichrist Pope Pius XI said, the one who was Pope during the restoration of the Vatican in the Lateran Treaty time, February 1929. And who died about the time when the Second World War broke out and then gave over to Pope Pius XII, Hitler's Pope, as we know already. And it starts off with another quote that comes from the Prophets of Religion from Upton Sinclair. Quote, "Friend, what is this you are doing? I am performing spiritual exercises. See how I rise." Unquote. See how I rise? Now you can understand this in twofold. One fold, of course, is how you rise, quote unquote, spiritually when you're getting enlightened. Yeah? And the other one is about speaking real levitation. No, I am not speaking about something that is jumping out of my fantasy, but levitation is real. When you are demon possessed, these things happen. And when you are participating in spiritual exercises, you are getting demon possessed. So you can understand this, see how I rise, in 2 different ways. A mysterious cloud of darkness covers all the affairs of the Jesuits, Chateaubriand once said. And this is no more so than with the spiritual exercises, an occult masterpiece written in 1533 by Ignatius Loyola. This collection of mysticism accounts in a large part for the secret of This collection of mysticism accounts in a large part for the secret of Loyola's success. These exercises were intended to bring spiritual illumination by means of systematic meditation, invocation. Invocation, what is that? Invite another spirit. contemplation, visualization, and trancing, putting yourself in a trance, hypnotizing yourself. Okay? Like the sorcery used by the magicians of Egypt to effect their miracles in imitation of those wrought by God at the hand of his servant Moses, the Jesuits too have their spiritual formula. A well-trained Jesuit is really a wizard in clerical robes. And that's why I even like to call Simon the Sorcerer, the Magi, who we get to know in the book of Acts in chapter 8, the first Jesuit. Mm-hmm. Consider, for example, Ignatius Falzon, lived between 1813 and 1865, who would, quote, levitate on frequent occasions, unquote, during daily mass and other devotions, including the Way of the Cross and the Rosary, on account of his practice of the spiritual exercises. I haven't read this before, dear brethren, but here the book states exactly what I said in the beginning when the quote I read from Upton Sinclair, "See how I rise." The high regard in which the Catholic Church holds the spiritual exercises is seen from the decree by Antichrist Pope Paul III on July 31st, 1548. Quote, so that their fruit may be more spread, and more of the faithful may be induced to use them with greater devotion. We, therefore, have caused these instructions and exercises to be examined, and our Vicar General in things spiritual at Rome have found that these exercises are full of piety and holiness, and that they are and will be extremely useful and salutary for the spiritual profit of the faithful. We have, besides, as we should, due regard to the rich fruits which Ignatius and the aforesaid society founded by him are constantly producing everywhere in the Church of God, and to the very great help which the said exercises have proved in this, unquote. You have to understand, dear listener, when I read things like this, that it has absolutely nothing to do with the God of the Bible, that has nothing to do with piety and holiness as it is stated in the Bible, because we are speaking, as they say themselves, about sorcery, and sorcery is condemned by the God of the Bible. Yeah? Never forget that. So this society of Jesus venerates another Jesus. They do not venerate the Jesus Christ of the Bible, he who came down from heaven as a man and took away the sins of the world, the perfect Lamb. That's not the Jesus they are talking about here. In earlier chapters, P.D. Stuart continues, we read the diabolical tenets contained in their extreme oath and their lecture of initiation. Would the Jesuits really carry out the bloody pledges made in their abominable oath or the plans laid down in their constitutions? H. Boehmer, professor of the University of Bonn in Germany, gives us this solid answer in his work, Les Jésuites, the Jesuits. Quote, we imbue unto him spiritual forces, which he could find very difficult to eliminate later. These forces can come up again to the surface sometime after years or not even mentioning them, and become so imperative, meaning compelling, that the will of the Jesuit finds itself unable to oppose any obstacle and has to follow their irresistible impulse through the spiritual exercises. Unquote. This is taken from the book The Jesuits or Les Jésuites from H. Boehmer, from the German translation in Philadelphia, published in 1928. Now, what I think is most and for all important in this, and maybe you can support me a little bit in this kind of thinking, Bret. Mm-hmm. When we read here that it says, we imbue unto him spiritual forces which he would find very difficult to eliminate later. These forces can come up again to the surface sometimes after years of not even mentioning them, and becomes so imperative that the will of the Jesuits finds itself unable to oppose any obstacle and has to follow their irresistible impulse. What does that remind you of when you read that? Have you ever heard of MK Ultra?
Oh, yeah. Right.
Have you ever heard of the CIA, the Catholics in Action, making brainwashing programs, torturing people to the way that they split personalities, and all of a sudden they can, with some kind of signal, trigger the other personality to come above, even though that has been hidden in that person itself for years? Any comment there, Brad?
Well, yeah, that's programming to some degree there. Yeah. And the Bible is the way that we should be programming ourselves by reading the Bible, so to speak, because those are the contrary to this world. These spiritual exercises are, um, like you said at the beginning of this recording, Jörg, we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
It's hard to dig into this. It's really not that easy because it's so incredibly chemical. It's a chemical. I don't know what to say here.
Listen, what I wanted to make sure that our listeners understand, who have come, quote unquote, awake to the New World Order. You don't come awake to the New World Order without studying all the stuff of the CIA and MK Ultra and watching movies like The Manchurian Candidate, for example.
Oh, yeah, right.
And the point that I want to make is that the Jesuits tell us through their Ratio Studiorum, which is movies, for example, which is television, for example, and when we are watching movies like The Manchurian Candidate, they find out some fancy way how this person is controlled. But actually, this all goes back to the spiritual exercises of the Jesuits. And that is the point that I want to make. There are so many things in this world where we see the work of the Jesuits, but we don't recognize it as the work of the Jesuits because we don't know how the Jesuit functions, how the Jesuit works, how the Jesuit is educated and trained.
Right.
And therefore, these spiritual exercises are a wonderful example, because everybody who sees this video, I'm quite sure, even though whether he's a Bible believer or not, he surely has heard of MK Ultra.
Yes.
He surely has heard of the experiments the CIA has made on humans in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. There is even in America, this is open paper. You can watch the files online of trials that have been where the CIA has been even persecuted for splitting personalities of persons and doing human experiments on this kind of thing, on this sort of thing. And therefore, it is very important that we understand that the basis of all that, what you hear and see there, like MK Ultra, Manchurian Candidate, and all these things, they have their roots in the spiritual exercises of the Jesuits. That's where it all actually comes from, because these spiritual exercises are nothing else but sorcery. They are the same thing with which Simon the Sorcerer, who came from who was a Sanhedrin, if I'm not mistaken, or a Samaritan. He was a Samaritan, a Sadducee of Samaria in that time, and he wanted to reach chapter 8 of Acts. There it states he wanted to buy the power of the Holy Spirit from the apostles. And they rebuked him, of course. But he was a sorcerer before. He was known. He was very well known in the land where he came from. People knew what he was doing. And he was, quote unquote, driving out demons and all that stuff, like the Roman Catholic Church does. But the Bible says that Beelzebub cannot drive out Beelzebub. it's all a show. That's what they do. And they base this show on the spiritual exercises. And I just think it is a very important point that we think about this when we read something like this, because in this quote from Burma, it is very well said, not in these words, but he says these forces can come up again to the surface sometimes after years of not even mentioning them. That means that there is another personality sleeping within you. You have been made to accept multiple personalities, 2, 3, 4, sometimes even more personalities. How is that possible? That is possible through torture methods on the one hand, and that is also possible through possession, through demon possession. And therefore, I think it is quite important, because a lot of people do not understand or believe what we are reading here about the spiritual exercises, but they do believe what they read about MK Ultra and the Manchurian Candidate. Now they have maybe a link where they can link this secular knowledge they have gained to the spiritual source where it comes from. And that's the point that I wanted to make, Bret.
Very good. Please continue.
We have just read a most startling statement that when a Jesuit is inducted into the order, he is placed under hypnotic processes, occult spiritual forces that can be invoked at any time in the future to compel him to do the bidding of his superiors. I have to make a little comment here. Dear reader, dear listener, if you believe me or not, I don't care. I haven't read this before. I'm reading the sentence now for the very first time in my life, and it says exactly what I just stated, doesn't it? Now the author continues, it is achieved through the spiritual exercises, a compulsory hypnotic induction for all Jesuits, which, curiously, is now very popular in some Protestant churches. Yes, these spiritual exercises, by the way, are used in the seminaries to educate your quote-unquote Protestant pastors. These mysterious exercises owe their antecedents to the Islamic Sufis, the magic of the dervishes, the Aladdins of the East. James White, a noted hypnotist, explains the power of the hypnotic induction. Quote, the hypnotized may fall hopeless victims to the most criminal and harmful actions, not only while they sleep, but after they have been awakened. I have to stop this reading right here. Doesn't that remind you of the voodoo they practiced in Haiti and in Africa, where that comes from? This voodoo, this zombinism? Because what is a zombie? That is a living person who has no will of his own and puts his will completely under the power of somebody else. That's voodoo. Yeah. Again, the hypnotized may fall hopeless victims to the most criminal and harmful actions. Yeah, because he doesn't have a mind of his own. He doesn't think for himself. He leaves that to somebody else. He is wax in the hand of his superior. You know,
right?
Or as the Jesuits say, he is like a walking stick in the hand of an old man who can use that stick for whatever purpose he wishes to.
Yep. That's right.
The hypnotized may fall hopeless victims to the most criminal and harmful actions, not only while they sleep, but after they have been awakened. There lies such infernal power in the hands of the hypnotizer that everyone ought to be strictly forbidden to meddle with hypnotism, except those who are honorable and trustworthy. The hypnotized can by all kinds of suggestions be made not only to harm themselves, but also others, between brackets, assassinations, and they may even be irresistibly driven to commit any crime. Well, That's why I put between brackets there assassinations. Exactly. These people can be used, like in the movie, for example, The Manchurian Candidate, to assassinate whoever the superior wants him to. This power in hypnotism, and the Jesuit spiritual exercises comes from the same occult source as yoga, which energy comes from Shiva, one of the principal gods of the Hindu pantheon, who is sometimes represented as a yogi, and in whom are said to be concentrated the powers acquired by meditation, penance, and a life of austerity. Yeah, please, Bret, you wanted to make a comment there.
Oh yeah, well, this
No, I don't.
yoga is definitely being used in the churches.
Sure.
Yep, and they have these yoga classes in the churches now.
Do you know which is the most spoken word in the world, Bret?
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
That is the most spoken word in the world.
Oh, geez.
That is used during yoga, during quote-unquote meditation. That is nothing else but a special form of spiritual exercises. Yeah, but please continue in your comment. I didn't want to interrupt you there.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's why. I mean, you're going to church to hopefully learn more about the Bible, not yoga. Okay, that's
yeah. One thing is for sure, Bret. When you want to learn about the Bible, don't go to a church. Stay home and read your Bible.
Generally the case, isn't it, Jörg? Yeah.
I think that is the only advice that we can give to everyone.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's good advice too. Yep.
Now, P.D. Stuart continues here. Let us then consider Loyola's formula, which, like Rasputin's hypnotic powers, he bequeathed to all of his sons. After his horrific injury in battle and many personal disappointments, Ignatius, on his recovery, retired himself to a lonely cave. There it is said he sought and found refuge in the religion of his birth, which is Catholicism. It was during this phase of the Jesuit imago that Loyola claimed he discovered the demanding and self-mortifying spiritual exercises. The self-mortifying spiritual exercises. What does that say? I mean, this is why I read this book, because we have to explain words like this. The self-mortifying spiritual exercises, that means that when you enter the spiritual exercises, you kill yourself.
Yep, that's right.
You kill your body. You kill, first and for all, you kill your character. You kill your spirit. The spiritual exercises are self-mortifying. It is like committing suicide. It is spiritual suicide to enter into spiritual exercises. Let's put it that way. The place of Loyola's inspiration was very much like that of the Prophet Muhammad. A lonely cave dug out by the Dominican monks at the foot of the mountain of Manresa in Spain, near the river Cardona. He had already been to Mount Montserrat, where he spent all night in vigil in March 25th, 1522, and there hung his shield and sword upon the altar of a shrine of the Black Virgin, the Madonna, an apparition that was there, a statue that was put there after an apparition of Fatima, that city in Portugal that was named by the Muslims in that time. And the Black Virgin, the Black Madonna, it's the same as the Virgin Mary. It's the Virgin. For 10 months, P.D. Stuart continues, he fasted in sackcloth and with only a rope tied around his loins. He tortured his body, so that is the practice of self-flagellation, or how do you call that?
Yeah, that's right. Flagration or something. Yeah.
Yeah, flagration, like they do in Opus Dei. Yeah.
That's right.
He tortured his body while practicing a form of transcendental meditation. It was during this period of self-flagellation, well, there stands the word that I was just looking for.
Yes.
During this period of self-flagellation that Loyola is said to have had great visions of heaven, the angels, and the saints, and to have conversed with God, Jesus, and Mary while meditating and fasting almost to death. And I'm going to tell you, if you don't come to that idea yourself, those were demons playing God, playing Jesus, playing Mary, playing angels, and giving Loyola visions of heaven. Those were demons. Those were fallen angels. Those were the ministers who work for the angel of light in that Lucifer was turned when he was cast down to heaven as to earth as Satan, as the Bible says that Satan is transformed into an angel of the light. Therefore, it is no wonder that his ministers are also turned into ministers of righteousness, and that includes all the fallen angels, because Lucifer took with him a third of the angels of heaven in that time. Can you imagine how many those were? The Book of Exercises, says one Jesuit, was truly written by the finger of God. Yeah, what God? Not the God of the Bible. And delivered to Ignatius Loyola by the Holy Mother of God. What? Holy Mother of God? Where is that in the Bible? Where is in the Bible that our holy God has a mother? Our holy God has no beginning and no end. He always existed. I'm speaking about the Father. He is holy. He has no mother, and surely no holy mother. That's not biblical. This is all Roman Catholic teaching. And anybody who reads this or understands this or hears this or sees this in a video has to understand that Roman Catholicism has absolutely nothing to do with the Bible. The Book of Exercises, says one Jesuit, just to repeat this a little bit, was truly written by the finger of God, the God of this world then maybe, and delivered to Ignatius Loyola by the Holy Mother of God, meaning by an apparition of the Virgin Mary, the Queen of Heaven. In fact, Loyola simply adapted the ritual mysticism of the Alumbrados, the illuminated ones of Spain that we spoke about earlier, the same society of which Loyola had been convicted of being a member. In fact, these exercises, so-called, were derived from the Barbelonian rites, and they have made Loyola's brigade the most feared and the most formidable of Catholic warriors, a special cadre of quote-unquote priests. In keeping with the purest tradition of the Alumbrados, Ignatius claimed to have seen lights flashing, Jesus and Mary as well as Satan, the latter in the form of a spiral of light around him. What did I just say biblically? Satan is transformed into an angel of the light, a spiral of light around him. Comes close to that, huh? His most bizarre claim was to have chased Satan around the cave like a dog with a stick. It was from these demented, distracted, and insane experiences that Loyola developed his spiritual exercises, which he wrote down in a book by the same name. It was by these set spiritual exercises that Loyola claimed he was given the quote-unquote secret doctrine of the Catholic Church. What was the secret doctrine that Loyola discovered in the Catholic Church? We shall learn what that quote-unquote doctrine is later on, just to keep you on the top of your chair that you are going to follow our reading of Codeword Barbelon. Antichrist Pope Paul III in 1548, at the request of the Jesuit General Francis Borgia, approved the spiritual exercises as being, quote, full of Spirit of God, and very useful for the edification and spiritual profit of the faithful, unquote. And in the encyclical letter Ad Catholici Sacerdoti, Antichrist Pope Pius XI recalled the classic virtues of all the priesthood. Quote, "It is not enough to withdraw to the sacred seclusion of the spiritual exercises only at the intervals, but you should enter into retreat more often and for longer periods, according to the practice of priests of great zeal." Unquote. Now, I want to give Bret the floor for a few moments, because first of all, if you don't talk, you fall asleep, and that's not the idea. And let me just kid a little bit. But you're living over there in Minnesota. But
right.
with that, I'm not telling any secret, right?
No.
And you have a retreat right in front of your doorstep, don't you?
I hate that word. I was gonna just comment. You know what? I should look that word up. Retreat. You know what? Where did this word come from?
Yeah, but you have that in your city, don't you? You have this education center there of the Jesuits that offers retreats, right?
Yeah.
You showed me that on the internet.
Sure,
you showed me the site.
Yep, that's not too far away. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's just what I wanted to say, Bret. Share with our listeners, please, a little bit of your experience that you have there, more or less, right in front of your door.
Well, these people are embedded in the churches, Jörg, in our quote unquote Protestant churches. I grew up with this, and it was revealed to me a couple years back, or a few years ago, and it was well, I don't know. I mean, it's very disturbing to find out what Jesuitism is really all about, and the retreats. Well, I'm not really going into much detail here, Jörg, because I'm still waking up. I'm not capable.
Those retreats are actually courses that are offered to people who want to learn about the spiritual exercises, and they can do that for a week, for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, for 28 days, something like that, and go on a quote-unquote retreat where they are put into little groups with a superior in that group. That goes all back to where you can read about this in of the Goodwill Society of Lucis Trust, that found all that stuff from Alice Bailey in the beginning. Man. And those little groups, there is a superior, and everybody else has to submit to that superior, and they are doing spiritual exercises, meaning imaginations, hypnotizations, all day long for a week or 2 or 3 or even 4 weeks. And by staying there, that is the quote-unquote retreat that you have there. That's like going on a vacation,
Right.
But actually, you are sending your brain on a vacation. And when you are a little bit unlucky, you won't even see your brain ever again.
Yeah, that's right. You got it.
And that are those retreats. So it is not necessary for you, Bret, to look that up on the internet right now, what is meant with it. I think the explanation I gave is more than enough. And who wants to have more of that, well, just...
Oh, I wouldn't go to the internet.
Go into
plenty of books.
just go into any search engine on the internet and enter spiritual exercises and spiritual retreats. And you will get a lot of information that you can get right out of there and avail yourself to that information and add that to the reading of the book that we are giving here.
Yeah, the Lutheran churches have really done a great deal with this, Jörg. They have.
Mm-hmm.
They really have. They've been really, really, what do you want to say, infiltrated that way, compromised.
Sure.
Yeah, they've been compromised. Let's say compromised. But yeah, I grew up in a very compromised church. So, And that's what they do. They go on retreats and they yeah, it's really not very fun actually. I have very bad memories of going to one of these quote unquote retreats as a child up there up north with the people in my church. It was no good.
Mhm.
It really was no good.
I think to put that a little bit into a picture that people can imagine what we are talking about, it's like you have a dirty car and you bring it to a car wash.
Yeah.
You have a dirty brain, by way of speaking, and you bring it to a brain wash. And that's the retreat, you know?
Yeah, no doubt. That's a good
That's
way of
maybe
putting it.
it's maybe an easy way to put it in some kind of imagination that the people can cope with.
Well, but the brain, of course, as we know, Jörg, is so incredibly deep and complex that way that you have to train a child to be, the way you want him to be when he grows up. I mean, this is what the Bible tells us, right?
Mm-hmm.
You train a child. So if you train him in the spiritual exercises, guess what? You give him over to the devil, basically.
Yeah, you are breeding monsters.
Yeah, that's right. So why
That's
on
why,
earth would a Lutheran church want to do that? Well, it's because they've been kissing the hand of the Pope behind your back. That's why.
yeah, otherwise there would be no explanation why they signed in 1999,
Yeah.
the joint doctrine of justification with the Roman Catholic Church and gave up their
Yeah.
protests. Huh?
That's a horrible reality. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yep, they gave up their protest.
Okay, let's continue here with the last part of this chapter that is called The Book of Exercises, a course in mysticism. Unlike the regular priesthood, Jesuits must undertake, they are obliged, the spiritual exercises of Loyola. During the 30-day initiation rite, that, like I just said, even a month of this retreat, during the 30-day initiation rite of passage, the novitiate is told what to think, he is told how to feel, when to groan, how to sigh, and what to imagine. He is encouraged to picture the scene in his imagination, noting all of the details, and then to insert himself into the scene and participate in it. Unquote. You know, this is like, how can you compare that? When you are sitting in front of a painting, and all of a sudden you imagine you are melting into that painting. You are not a spectator from the outside looking at that painting, but you are going inside that picture and seeing things that other people don't see. This is spiritual exercises. Thus, the author continues, by means of mental control and rapture, the Jesuit is supposed to be transformed. This has its parallels in the Buddhist and Hindu mysticism of the Mahatmas, whose goal is that of conquering the self. Loyola's meditation encourages the deliberate visualization of the subject with the aim of achieving transcendence, the mystic yogic path of inner union with the higher self, or Sanat Kumara. Now, when the author here just said that thus by means of mental control and rapture, the Jesuit is supposed to be transformed, this has its parallels in Buddhist and Hindu mysticism, I just want to turn you to the book The Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop, where you see that this is what all these pagan religions have in common. Their source, their roots, they come from Babylon. And this is where all this comes from. This is where Buddhism actually comes from. This is where Hinduism actually comes from. And this is why they are speaking of a union of a higher self. You know? Yea, hath God said?
Yeah.
Oh, you will surely not die. You will become as gods. It's the same thing. over and over again. Now, the act of imaging, or visualization is intended to effect a mental transformation, a kind of subtle conditioning or reprogramming of the mind. This is a common feature of ritual magic exercises to employ the techniques of concentration and visualization. Also included in the exercises is the, quote, frequent repetition of Anima Christi, Loyola's own habitual prayer, which is a mantra for disorientation and sensory deprivation. What's the aim of all this? What's the aim? Total domination of the individual's mind by spiritual forces. And we are not speaking about the Holy Spirit of the Bible, who will lead you into all truth. But we are speaking about demons, fallen angels that are taking over your personality, and you are just the body that they then can inhabit. Total domination of the individual's mind by spiritual exercises is the aim. Roland Barthes has distilled the essence of Loyola's spiritual exercises as follows. Here comes a quote from his book, Sade, Fourier, Loyola, which was published in 1971. Quote, the obsessional character of the spiritual exercises blazes forth in the accounting passion transmitted to the exercitant. As soon as an object, intellectual or imaginary, appears, it is broken up, it is divided and numbered, being a matter of accounting for his sins. Accounting for them in a faulty way will in turn become an error that must be added onto the original list. Each failure induces and requires more accounting. Everything is immediately divided, subdivided, classified, numbered off in annotations, meditations, exercises, and mysteries. Unquote. This repetitious mental gymnastics, that's another word for spiritual exercises, mental gymnastics. This repetitious mental gymnastics causes fragmentation of the mind. You know what happens when you fragmentate your computer? This happens when you fragmentate your mind, of the differentiation of its parts with the emergence of a quote-unquote, I say, new self. You can become as gods. By means of this most subtle form of hypnosis, the mind of the Jesuit is reorientated, reprogrammed, and altered. In this way, the men of the Society of Jesus, La Compagnie de Jesus, although scattered over distant nations, are said to have a similitude of matters and mental state. Quote, the Jesuits in all Roman Catholic countries are also observed to have a character peculiar to themselves. Unquote. Great zeal and unquestioning obedience to their general, who is to be supposed as the vicar of Christ, actually the vicar of Satan, as the white pope, so the black pope, so the superior general of the Society of Jesus. Great zeal and unquestioning obedience, obedient like a corpse, like a cadaver, to their general. And there ends the reading on page 119 of this chapter that we've just read, chapter 11, Spiritual Exercises, the Light from a Cave. And we will stop our reading here, but maybe Bret has some final comments to do on this reading we did today.
Thank you, Jörg. Yes, I was just getting to thinking that there's probably many different ways to come to this same result at the end of your quote unquote exercises. This demonic experience that these people subject themselves to reminds me of alcoholism, actually, or being completely addicted to drugs, the heavier drugs, not the light ones, the heavy ones.
Like mushrooms.
Well, I can't imagine ever being addicted to those, Jörg, but yeah, I suppose.
No, but I know I know what I've learned about these mushrooms is that is a psychedelic kind of drug.
Yep.
Even though it is natural, that at least is better than crystal meth or something, this chemical stuff.
Or LSD.
I mean, yeah, all drugs are, of course, absolutely damnable.
Mm-hmm.
But these mushrooms give you a kind of a spiritual exercise, a spiritual experience that is beyond belief. I mean, anybody who has not done it can really not understand that. And there are many
that's true
videos out there on YouTube that you can watch and where you can see people who took these mushrooms, these experiences all about. I mean, I don't advocate doing that, but I'm just telling you that with these kind of helping parts like drugs, as Bret says, whether it's mushrooms that you take, whether it's cocaine that you take, or heroin, or crystal meth, or whatever comes up there, or ecstasy and all these stuff.
Ooh, yeah.
Even marijuana is a very dangerous drug in that regard, because it takes away your conscience at that moment. And all of these drugs are helping, of course. This is something that was not spoken of in this book. No, because the spiritual exercises do absolutely work without these drugs.
That's right.
But a lot of people who want to experience that and want to help it a little bit just are taking drugs. And therefore, and I'm very thankful that Bret brought up alcohol in the beginning. Alcohol is one of the most dangerous drugs we have in this world because it is so easy accessible.
Yes, it is.
You can get it everywhere. And in the United States of America, you're not allowed to drink alcohol until you are 21. But who cares? And here in Europe, you may drink beer and wine from that you are 16 years old. That's 5 years difference. How much more drunk you think Europeans get in comparison to Americans? Alcohol is available on every street corner. And the problem is that alcohol always is a booster for the mental state that you are in at that moment. That means when you are depressed, when you are mad, when you are angered with something and you drink alcohol, that feeling is being multiplied by drinking alcohol. And that is why you have so many acts of violence with people who drank alcohol. On the other hand, that's why you have never crimes of violence connected, for example, with smoking marijuana, because it has a total different influence on your body. But what they both do is they switch off your conscience. They switch off your normal, healthy thinking in one way or another. And that's why with drugs, those experiences are even helped. And that doesn't make them less dangerous. On the contrary, that makes them even more dangerous. But I think there's more that you wanted to say, right, Bret?
Well, I have old acquaintances, being a musician, that I have old acquaintances that call me up from time to time. And, one of these guys that I know was telling me about a horrible experience he had, but he's still drinking. You got to sober up to be able to deal with this. You can't resort to going back to the same. It's like the true definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results, You can't do that. That's the problem with alcoholism, is that the brain is trained in such a way that they just keep resorting to it, And it's really not that easy for an alcoholic to become sober. It really isn't. It's really difficult.
No, and let me tell you one thing, Bret, and you and all the listeners of this video, whatever kind of addiction you have, and I'm talking about, for example, when you are smoking, smoking cigarettes or smoking marijuana or whatever, or drinking alcohol or any other drug problem that you have, for all of these, there is a remedy. But there's only one remedy.
That's right.
And that is the Bible.
The Bible's the best remedy. Yep.
When you come to Jesus Christ, no, it's not only the best remedy, Bret, it is even the only remedy.
Yes. Yep.
It is the only, we can do nothing of ourselves, but we can do everything with Jesus Christ. And when we really seek him, and when we really want to get out of this, then he will help us. And he is the only one who can help us. Because all these addictions is the same like being a sodomite. You are doing these because you are an idolater. You are maybe not aware of it, but you are, and that is the recompense that God gives you.
Yep.
He punishes you with that addiction, be it smoking, be it being a sodomite, be it drinking alcohol, whatever. That is the recompense that God gives you.
Yes.
The only way out of there is repentance.
Yep. It's that simple.
It's that simple. Yeah, that's why no psychologist can help you. That's why no pharmaceutical drugs or ever that stuff can really help you. Those can only push you in a certain direction, but they can't get rid of it. Your mind is the only thing that can help you, and therefore you have to set your mind after the mind of God. And that is the only way that you can succeed in that.
Yeah, and that's no imitation either.
No.
It's no imitation. The Catholics have this book called The Imitation of Christ. It's an old book. I bought this book at a bookstore years ago. I had no idea what it was. And I have a copy sitting right in front of me. And this is a very subtle way to teach Roman Catholicism to any Christian. So, yeah, you have to really watch the books you read and the authors you choose, And I really never would have looked at it that way if I wouldn't have dug into Jesuitism a little further, yeah, I don't think there's anything new under the sun. The problem is that the devil doesn't like to keep calling himself the devil, so he just uses Jesus' name instead. That's the problem. It's a big problem.
Yeah, and we are here and doing this reading to make you just aware of these points.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Okay, we should bring our broadcast to an end, Bret.
Sounds good.
Because the chapter is done, and we will continue next time. We will continue next time on page 120 of the book Codeword Barbelon with chapter 12, Unhesitating Obedience, the General and the Holy Office. And we will even get much deeper into the Society of Jesus with the further we go in the reading of this book. Thanks for inviting me today, Bret, and thanks for coming to the table. And I hope that we can do this again, maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after. We'll see. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for commenting. Joggler66 from More of the Truth says, God bless you and bye-bye.
And thank you, Jörg, and we'll see you tomorrow. And God bless you, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.